Please note that the information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Hey, welcome to Fertility Ain't Fair, the podcast where we normalize the conversations around infertility, reproductive health, and wellness. I'm your host, Brittany Jackson, here to share laughs, tears, and aha moments as we dive into our wild world with a girl who truly gets it by sharing personal insights from my own experience. Along the way, we're joined by guests who open up about their journeys, the highs, the heartbreaks, and everything in between. So whether you're new to the infertility world, looking for support, or just trying to figure it all out, this is your space to feel seen, heard, and maybe even laugh along the way. Real, raw, unfiltered, because fertility, it ain't fair, but you don't have to face it alone. Welcome back, Fertility Ain't Fair family. I'm your host, Britt, and on this episode of Fertility Ain't Fair, the podcast, we are tapping in with our girl, Carly. She is the head of the Concierge Team over at myStoria. And if you have not heard of myStoria, you are definitely going to want to hear more about them after you talk to her and hear from her, I should say, because fertility really shouldn't be this hard. And they are a platform that is dedicated towards making sure you have all the information that you need to make the right decisions around women's health. So yeah, it's going to be a good one. We're also discussing baseline fertility health, where to start, what tests to ask for, because these things aren't being taught and are not being brought to your attention usually ever until it has to be. And so we're all about more information. Carly has over 15 years in the nursing field, and she has over 6 years specializing in fertility. So our girl has the credentials, and she also has, more importantly, the passion and empathy for this community. And she's really big on advocacy. She is going to be your warrior, as she says in our episode, making sure that you have what you need in terms of support and guidance to make the right informed decisions with compassionate care. So let's get into this episode of Fertility Ain't Fair, the podcast. Carly, it's time to chat. Welcome to Fertility Ain't Fair. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you again for saying yes. I told you kind of before we hopped in here that I was just grateful to have the conversation, because we're talking about baseline fertility health because we all need help. And so I'm glad we'll be able to kind of walk some folks through what that looks like and what that means. Also, I'm excited to hear about your transition from nursing to fertility nursing. And we'll get into why I feel just like a little just hearts over to you, because you all are a very important piece of the fertility puzzle for so many reasons. And then we'll wrap up with myStoria, because I was not familiar with the platform and the company until I found you on Instagram, of course. So I'm excited to hear more about what you all are doing, what your role consists of there, and to just let everyone know what is available, because there is never not a time when we need, less resources. We need more resources, right? So I'm excited for that. But thank you for being in our space. So before we get into all those great things, let's jump into how we ask every guest to start, which is tell us right here, right now, in this moment, in this time, how do you define yourself? What words or phrases would you use to describe who you are today?
I would describe myself a few adjectives. So I describe myself as down to earth, honest, funny, and a straight shooter. I'm sort of the definition of what you see is what you get. I like to keep it real, and I think that's why I'm really good at building therapeutic relationships with people, because I'm always going to tell you the truth, and I'm always going to tell you like I would want to be told. I don't like to overly gloss over things. I want to give it to people real all the time so that they know exactly what's going on and they can make the best choices for themselves. And that's how I like to nurse.
I love it. I respect it. I'm also someone who can appreciate that from a patient standpoint. So let's get into that. So you have, I think, over 15 years of nursing experience, but the last several you have been in fertility nursing. So I was telling you again off camera that for me and my experience, and as you mentioned, for I'm sure many nurses, they get the good, the bad, the ugly, right? You guys see us at our best times, at our worst times. You are the ones who I think are most consistent in a lot of our health journeys, definitely in the infertility space and fertility space. I know for me, I had two amazing nurses at my prior clinic with my prior doctor, and I've discussed them on multiple episodes in the past, on past seasons, about how those two were like my rocks. I mean, because I'm the portal person reaching out to you every week, asking questions, and they would get back to me so quickly. They were always just so sweet. They were rooting for me. And people could say, well, they were for everybody. I'm like, well, maybe that's part of the job, I would hope. But I really did feel a personal connection to them. And they went above and beyond, reaching out, checking on me when I wasn't in active, treatment cycles. Or if we had a really awful experience, they would reach out to me on the side and just do a follow-up with me. Nothing having to do with because I had to, or with your 2-week follow-up. It was just like, hey, I've been thinking about you, Brittany. And when we left that clinic, I was just like so sad to leave my nurses because I just felt like they were the ones who held me together, and also the ones that just like calmed me down when they had to deliver awful news. Because just being honest, like most of the phone calls I got from them weren't good. I had more bad than good calls. And it got to a point where I was like, hey, so moving forward, I'm going to have you guys go to voicemail, and I'm going to get the news when I'm ready. And then I will call you back when I'm ready, because I am so just overwhelmed breaking down the phone with you guys every single time. But they've never made me feel bad about it. They never made me feel like, okay, we have, 1,000 more phone calls to make today. Like, it was just always very much so like, take your time, process, and they were the best. So what led you to say, okay, I want to get into this type of nursing? And like, how has the experience been so far?
So I've been nursing since 2006, so it's been a while, and I worked in several different areas of medicine since that time, and I really, through that, found out like I really love specialty medicine, specialty nursing, focusing on like one small area, working in a little bit of smaller teams where you can really like dive into that knowledge. And I'm originally from Sault Ste. Marie, and I worked for this female surgeon there, and I did like a little bit of everything in her office, but I found her really inspiring, and we were dealing, with a lot of females, and like seeing a lot of females with like cancer, different things like that. So I was starting to get like a little bit like fired up about women's health. And then I relocated to Waterloo, Ontario, and that sort of branched out the areas of medicine I was able to work in because there wasn't fertility care up there. And I was like, what do I want to do? I was looking around and I'm like, oh, this looks really cool. Like, this is right up my alley. When you just have that feeling inside, you're like, this is it. So I interviewed, I got the job, and I just dove like head first right into it. And I loved it. But then it just was like igniting my passion even more. And I was getting like more fired up about women's health. And I was just like, talking to so many people and seeing so many people come through, and everyone saying to me, if I knew then what I knew now, I would do things so different. I would make so many decisions. And I'm thinking like, yeah, me too. Like I didn't even know this, and they didn't even teach me this in nursing school. And I was just getting angry, and I was getting like that itch to like, I want to do something more, but how do I do that? And I want to reach more people and help more people on a broader scale. And how do I do that? And you have these moments in your life sometimes where it's like everything has led you to like this point. And it's like, if you take this risk, it could be something big. I kind of had like one of those epiphany moments with myStoria. And it was like, yes, this is it. Everything's been leading to now. Take the risk, do it, join this, because you're going to do great things with this great group of people. And that's what brought me here today.
I love the aligning of the stars, and that you were like, no, I have to do more. Like, I wish I knew more. I wish I could help, someone else know more. And so I love that, on most of our episodes, we're talking to women, and I feel like a lot of us have said like, hey, there's a better way, or there's more out there, or I want to help someone else out. And it just really snowfalls into a new career or a new side hustle or a new business. And I'm just always so thankful that you all say yes to talking to a complete stranger, because These stories need to be told. So that is exciting. So in your space now, like how how have things changed for you? Like, prior to what you were doing and kind of what you're doing now, like what is different in this space? How do you feel like you are making, that impact, that you were looking to make before?
I'm allowed to sort of help create like the education and the content that goes out. And then I'm able to, talk to a lot of different people, like amongst a lot of different areas, like across Canada and the US. Because part of the issue I think we're dealing with across the board in many areas of healthcare is access to care. There are so many people out there for so many reasons that don't have access to care. So it's how can I help you connect you to resources, help dive in and start asking questions. I do best like one-on-one and diving into the puzzle and digging and being like, okay, these are all the pieces. How can I put this together? What's missing? Finding the holes and then educating people saying, there's this treatment out there. I think you need to ask questions about this. And maybe this clinic, not that there's anything wrong with that clinic, but maybe you've outgrown that clinic. And there's other things that I'm seeing that I've learned about through, everything I've done, that like there are other doctors that offer these things that you might want to get a second opinion. You might want to ask these questions. What is like the average fertility journey for people? Like 5 years. How can we shorten that time? How can we shorten that journey? How can we connect people with better resources and lift people up? And if we're all like people like me and you are talking, how can we focus everyone more on collaboration instead of competing? Let's all level up our education. Let's all work together to push research and treatment and fertility further where it needs to be to help people on like a global scale. Instead
Yeah.
of like, so yeah, that's how it's changed for me. Instead of like being on the ground, like just like kind of doing like the cycle monitoring every day, like which I love and I love connecting to people, but it's like I want to reach more people.
No, that's amazing. Um, I'm glad that you were able to find this space. And so you mentioned like connecting the dots for people, getting them resources, asking them different questions, or getting them where they need to be quicker. So let's get into that. Because a part of that is understanding fertility health and like where to start. Because I think to the point that you said of like, I wish I would have known this, or, I meet so many different, women and couples now, whether I'm advocating for myself or online or in person, and I open up and share my story. And, a lot of it is, I wish I would have known, or we were never taught that, or no one ever brought it to my attention. I didn't even know, you don't know what to ask, right? If you have no idea it exists. So you just don't know what you don't know. And so what I'm hearing is that, this is a place where you can find some of these core starting places. So let's get into that. So one of the things that I love to do is talk to like younger women and say, you're in your 20s, like here are some things that you might want to think about, right? And it's not because you're ready to conceive now, or, but it's having the education, having the knowledge, and knowing how to make smart decisions. And again, what questions to ask, what tests to go to. So if you were encountering, a young woman who was just wanting to know, what does fertility health mean? Like, I don't want to have a kid yet, so I'm not there, but I also want to understand what's my baseline. Where would you start with that person?
So first off, I would let them know, you can't think about it just in terms of fertility health. You need to think about it in terms of your entire health, because depending on what's going on, it could be linked to your entire health, and it's things can affect your entire future of your life. Things like, are you having symptoms of PCOS? What are those symptoms? And going through that, because it's like, okay, now you're at risk for, type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and all these things, right? I think people don't realize that it really goes like hand in hand. It's really integral. So it starts on, everyone should be tracking their cycle. You need to start tracking your cycle when you're a teenager. When you first get your first period, you need to keep track of that, and you need to figure out, and there's so many great apps and things out there, but like what's a normal period really? Because what happens is we all sort of over time receive this education kind of down for like your mother, your grandmother, your sisters, your aunts, right? And if they've had painful periods, or experience things that weren't normal, they're going to be like, oh yeah, you have pain. Yeah, you have cramps. Yeah, that's that. And it's like, no, man, you probably have endometriosis, like exactly. So it's like, no, you need to understand what's normal and what's not. So really talking to like women about that, what really is a regular cycle? Because so many people have like a regularly irregular cycle. And it's like, no, something's quite off. And they don't realize they're kind of in that like weird gray area. So what's regular? What's irregular? And as soon as you're having like any type of irregularities, any type of like abnormal symptoms, that's really when you need to go to the doctor, you need to push. And you need to say, okay, something's going on. I want testing done. If your family doctor is not going to listen to you, if your gynecologist isn't going to listen to you, then there are clinics out there that will take self referrals. And it's like, get to a fertility clinic and say, I want to assess my fertility health to figure out where I'm at for my future planning. I've worked at a clinic before where a mother brought her daughter in because she knew something was wrong and people weren't listening, and testing was done. So there are other options and avenues that people just don't think about. So to get that baseline testing done and getting that blood work done, on all your standard fertility hormones, getting your ovarian reserve ran as well, which depending on where you live can be controversial. Because they'll say, you don't need to know that. That doesn't really let you know if you can get pregnant. Well, no, but along with everything else, it lets you know what your fertility status is. What if I've seen women in their early 20s who were in premature ovarian failure. If they didn't have their testing done, they wouldn't know that their AMH was low, their day 3 follicle stimulating level was high, so the clock is ticking fast, and their antral follicle count. All of those things together matter. And then it's, oh, now I got my testing done and my antral follicle count. What if it's too high for your ovaries? And you're like, man, I'm having symptoms. Like I'm having like male pattern hair growth all over my body. I'm having trouble like losing weight. All of a sudden I'm gaining all this weight around the middle. Well, you have signs and symptoms of PCOS. It's figuring out these things early, and you need to figure out these root causes early, right away when something's wrong. Because, when you're a teenager and in your 20s, it's now what is the root cause, instead of being like, oh, just take this birth control pill and you'll figure out later when you're trying to get pregnant. No. This affects my overall health. And what if I want to get pregnant down the road? Well, I need to start putting interventions into place now to manage my own health so that when I hit, 30, 35, however, what age you want to decide building your family at, that your health is in a good enough place to do that. Like, I feel like what's happening with women's health is our choices are being taken away from us even before we know they exist. I want to choose my own path. I want to be in control. I want to have the information I deserve about my own health. I don't want to be told, no, you're fine. Just take this pill. Don't ask any questions and we'll figure it out in 10 years. No. Who are you to tell me that? It's my body, that's one of the things like over fertility that really just got me like fired up. I'm like a huge advocate for as soon as something's wrong or something's not right in your period, get testing, find out the root cause, put the interventions into place so you have more options for your own future.
It shouldn't feel revolutionary, but it is. I think for a lot of medical doctors, right? Or practices. And I love what you're saying, because I was one of those people that had clear signs, right? Again, we all know that everyone's different. So there could be, I have endometriosis, I have, fibroids, I've had cysts like my whole life. And these are not normal things, right? They've been normalized. They're not normal. And so I love that you're saying like, hey, if anything seems out of whack, or if anything seems out of place, like, this is the time to start finding root causes, number one, which is a whole other conversation about why we don't dive into root causes properly in functional, testing and functional wellness and all of that. But because, like you said, okay, 10, 15 years go by, and then you're sitting here like, oh my God, I'm dealing with fertility issues or conception issues or miscarriage issues, or now I'm infertile or whatever it is. And you're like, well, how did I get here? You have no idea. And now it's to the point where, like you said, some things possibly can be worked around or fixed or resolved, and some of them can't because it's just gone for too long. And so now you're fighting against everything in your body. And that's, I feel like I was, that girl. And so it's important, I think, for everyone who's listening to be aware of that. And for, again, if it's caregivers or if it's mothers or if it's aunts or big sisters or whoever is, with young ladies, to also embrace this theory of thinking about things, which again seems so like, duh. Why would you not want to fix something when it's happening immediately or when it's happening? Why would you not want them to be educated, to know more now so that they're empowered in the future and just to have the knowledge to make the right decisions? But again, I think in a lot of our medical system at its core is really not, it seems like built that way. It seems very, like I said, it's very, you're fine, take a pill, take your Tylenol, sit down, and we'll deal with all those problems when you're however old, 30 plus or whatever it is. What do you think? What do you think is going to be, or what can change, I guess, that mindset? Because it seems like it needs to be like a fundamental change, right? Like I feel like for the medical system to think about this differently, but how are you able to make change? Like, what would it take, you think, to really make this the mindset and kind of the philosophy, especially when it comes to women and women's health, to make this more of a, not an exception, but the rule moving forward?
Literally like advocacy, like, and this is why like I love reaching more people, because if we all know better, we can advocate stronger. When you have every person going in and like, no, we're not going to stand for this care anymore, and just continuously pushing and advocating, it's like across the board, we're just not going to accept. And the more we're advocating all together, everyone in this space, every person's learning, advocating for themselves, this knowledge is also going to trickle down to people younger than us. And that's our future doctors. That's the people who are going to school. So just changing the mindset across the board, so that as doctors who are refusing to change their minds, I mean, they're not going to be around forever, right? There's going to be this shift. So if we're continuously creating this shift in this space, people coming up are going to know better. They're going to think differently when they're in medical school and when they're coming out, and they're just automatically going to come out with this like better mindset for thinking about like root causes and like women's health. I think it's going to take a while, but we can't stop. We all just have to keep pushing. You have to keep advocating and going to a different provider. No, you're not going to do what I need, then I'm going to go find somebody. Like naturopathic doctors, someone can do blood work. There's functional medicine doctors. There are people out there. Sometimes you have to dig to find those resources, but nobody cares about your health as much as you do. And people cannot give up, and we all have to keep pushing. And there are a lot of amazing doctors out there wanting to do things in this space, and they are also speaking up. They're on social media, some of them. They're trying to help educate, teach other doctors, teach their own patients as well. So if we're all working together and pushing forward, that's, I think, really what it's going to take. We just can't accept this brutal care anymore.
I'm with it, 100% all in. And we mentioned advocacy a lot. And so, and knowing, again, the information that you need to have to ask the questions, to speak up for yourself. So going back, there were a couple of things that we mentioned. So, AMH and ovarian reserve and, like labs to ask for. So let's back up for those people who have no idea what any of this foreign language is.
Yeah.
Because we would not know unless you've been educated in it, and I've had to walk through it like with fire. So what are some of the key, if you would tell someone who, again, just looking for, where do I start? What's my baseline fertility health? What are some of those core lab tests that you would say, hey, speak up to your doctor and ask for? And then is there anything else that you would recommend someone, walking into a practice to either ask about or to request as part of their baseline kind of workup?
Absolutely. So I think like a female reproductive and gonadal panel. So that's a panel of different blood tests. So you want to check like those, like what I'm going to call like your fertility hormone. So like your estradiol level, your luteinizing hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone, your progesterone, your testosterone, your prolactin. Obviously, they're going to check your HCG. So do a pregnancy test just to like make sure. A thyroid panel, you need to make sure your thyroid's working normal. If it's not, that's going to mess with your fertility big time. And usually like running some kind of like fasting insulin and like glucose levels as well. The AMH, like we mentioned, and sometimes depending on like signs and symptoms and what's going on, You may see like, I'm gonna say this and nobody's gonna remember it because it's like these longer words, but your DHEAs, we'll call them, and then we'll say your 17 OHPs. So those are two other blood tests that you can get, and that'll kind of give you like a nice span. You kind of want to do this blood work at the beginning of your cycle if you have regular cycles. So people will often say it's like my day 3 blood work, but I'd say you can do it on like anywhere from day 2, 3, or 4 of your cycle, because that's when a lot of your hormones too, like your follicle stimulating hormone, your estrogen, should be low. If they're really high, that's indicative that something else is going on. And then you should really get your blood type done and like a CBC, like a complete blood count, just to kind of check too, like a few general markers just to make sure everything's okay. And then imaging. Imaging is critical. You need to have imaging. You can't just have an ultrasound. That's not enough. You need to check to see if your fallopian tubes are open. So you should usually have like some kind of like preliminary ultrasound to, look at your uterus and your ovaries, and depending on like what day of your cycle, do you have like a normal follicle count in there? If you can get it done early in your cycle, it's nice because you can do the antral follicle count that they can look at in collaboration with your AMH, because that should go together to really assess your ovarian reserve. And then, and check for any like uterine anomalies, and they can kind of start to pick up on stuff in there. But then like later in mid cycle, it's nice if you can do that like sonohystogram or some other type of test that's the same, that really assesses the patency of your fallopian tubes and checks for more anomalies. So do you have polyps? Do you have fibroids? Are your tubes fully open? What's really going on? Because if both your tubes are blocked, and I've heard stories of a person doing fertility treatment for 2 years and not having a sonohystogram, and their tubes were blocked. There was no way this person was ever getting pregnant. They switched clinics. First thing they did is like, you have to have a workup redone. Let's reassess you. And they're like, you never had a sonohystogram sent. Both tubes blocked. Great IVF. Like, you have to have that. You need to know what's going on. So it's not only a balance of your hormones, but I always tell people in like the simplest terms, is the equipment working right?
I'm so floored at going 2 years and not knowing that someone had not one but 2 blood tubes. I'm so sad for that person. And I'm so glad they, obviously were able to get somewhere else and, get a new workup done immediately. We all know the cost of the financial cost, the mental cost, the physical cost of doing any type of fertility treatment, from the littlest to the biggest. And to walk that path for 2 whole years and not have even the right starting place is just devastating. It's already a lot, right? So you're already in a club you don't want to be in. And so then you're, in this club thinking that you're getting the help that you need to get to obviously the ultimate goal that you want. And you haven't even had a fair shake at a starting place. That's wild and very sad. And I'm sure they're not alone, which is so unfortunate. But thank you for laying that out, because I think it's really important that everyone understands. Again, I would have never known to ask for any of those things, in my younger years. And no one's going to be like, hey, do you want to do this? It's really important. Not what happened.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very backwards. It's very much like, we'll deal with it when it comes or if it comes. And I also want people to understand, this is just, as you said, for your own knowledge, for your own wellness. This, again, you could never want kids. It's so not just about having children. It all, as you said, connect. It's integral. It is, if you're having any kind of, women's health issues, reproductive issues, fertility issues, that can connect back to other things in your body that are not functioning properly. And so I want everyone to understand that it is not just about, being a mom. It's so much bigger than that. It's about you and your health. So let's get into, you mentioned resources, and I know you are part of the Concierge Team. And so what does that mean for a company like myStoria? Actually, before we even get there, what is myStoria? And tell us a little bit about the platform, what's happening over there, and kind of what your role is as part of this really important team for this app and platform.
Yeah, so myStoria is an online platform where you can track your fertility journey, centralize all your data. So input your data, we can get your medical records or you can upload them yourself, whichever you prefer. And we have the concierge service. So I am head of the concierge team. So, you're like, I need to keep track of my fertility journey. And that's kind of one of the big problems in this space is when you start having all these different providers or when you switch clinics, it gets a little chaotic. You see people walking around with these huge binders, right, everywhere. And it's like, who can keep track of that, right? So you can get your records, you can input your whole journey. We have a whole bunch of educational modules that ask you questions that help build your profile because there's some things that are important that you wouldn't even know to put in. And while you're building this huge fertility profile, having your fertility assessed, logging your journey, then if you want extra resources from me as the concierge, you can book appointments with me and my team, and then we can go through your profile for you if you want. And that's where I was saying about the pieces of the puzzle and digging and putting them together, and we can have an appointment and I'm like, okay, I've looked through everything. This is what I think. And here's some questions to ask. And this is what you can do. And there's so many different types of ways you can utilize me. So I have people, assess my fertility health, go through everything. Carly, tell me everything you think, or I am going for this test and I have no idea what it is. I don't know what to ask for. I don't know what to expect. Can we have an appointment and go through that? Absolutely. Carly, I have a doctor's appointment coming up. I don't even know what to ask them. Can we meet or can you send me a list of questions to ask them? Absolutely. Do you think I should get a second opinion? All of these things. And, sometimes I'm finding things and I'm saying, okay, these are the resources I think that you can tap into. And this is what I'm going to recommend. And I'll send people links. I'll send them resources. I send them lists of questions. Like I will do the work. You don't have to sit there Googling until 2 a.m. I'm here now. You don't need to do the full-time job after your full-time job of digging into your fertility because that's what we do at myStoria. So, and like having that, even like it'll work on your phone. So it is a web app, but it is like mobile friendly. So you could pull it in. You could have your list of concerns. You're like, okay, I need to remember I'm going to ask the doctor today this. And you have your list of symptoms. Like everything is right there for you. And you can just continue to grow like your journey. And you have like this beautiful timeline because everyone, you often think of your journey like in your timeline. Okay, I did this, then I did this, and I did this. And it's all there for you. So we're like the central hub, everything's here in one spot and we're going to connect you. And we have an amazing community, so in that community, you can get peer support, but it's a community that's also like moderated by us. We're in there as well. So you can get those nice different perspectives from people in different areas, and this is what they did and this is their experience. But then like a proper like medical person in there and saying, yes, like that is amazing. And think about these extra things too. So, some of these areas online, I love the online communities, but sometimes it gets a little bit like Wild West. And like, how do you sift through all of that and know what's accurate and what's not, So we have some great resources in there as well.
Have you been for my 7 years? I'm so confused. I'm over here just like baffled. Like she just, and truly it is a job after a job, it is. It's become my whole, a part-time job that you pay into, it doesn't pay you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very true. It's so overwhelming. And when you're thrown into this community, it's so heavy, right? It's already heavy with the diagnosis and then, all the information and the acronyms and finding support. And it sounds to me like, again, it's streamlining all the different things. So it gives you medical, it gives you a concierge for information. It's the Facebook groups and all of that. Because again, it's been great, but also it's a lot. It's like almost like wrapping all of these things up in a really nice bow. And that's what it sounds like. And it sounds like a dream.
And it's super pretty too. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm sure, if you get into it and you're, actually in it, I'm sure there's a lot more that unlocks. But I just love how modern and fresh and clean. It's very inviting, welcoming. And I love that it said 5 patients on the website. Yes. What's that about? So is there patients who are part of the team or the organization or?
So myStoria was created by our CEO, Jessica Chalk, who herself had a 6-year fertility journey and she walked away without baby. And she's like, she had all these things like, oh, I wish I would have known. And she had this idea and it grew and it grew. And she had some wonderful supporters and they're like, do it. So she sold her other business and she threw everything she had into this. And she came and put together this team. She found the people that she thought she needed help build it. So for me, for concierge, for the medical aspect, the nursing aspect, she came and got me and said, what do you think? And I said, let's do it. Let's build it. And our team, our founding team together, went with her dream, what she had started, she had brought it so far, and then we're just continuously taking it to the next level. So everyone that is with myStoria has either their own fertility journey or a personal connection to fertility.
Oh my God, I did not know that.
Yes, it's very neat.
Yeah.
For all of us. And that's why, and that sort of goes to like what you were talking about earlier, how much you loved your nurses. You can always tell the difference between someone who really cares and is passionate and someone who's in it for a paycheck. And you have the nurses that really care and love what they're doing. And everybody at myStoria deeply cares. And we work to the bone and we don't stop and we do what it takes to help everyone. And like, we're starting here, but like the trajectory is big for us. And that's why we want all the feedback. We are for us. We are by us. You want something, you want a feature, you have feedback for us. Let us know, because that's what we want to do. We want to make it better for you. We want to give you what you need.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story and for giving us that tidbit. That I think will definitely increase just the engagement and the excitement around it, and the want people to reach out to you all and see how they can be helped at any stage of their fertility journey. So if we wrapping up, like, what is one thing that you want to leave with our community after our conversation today?
Don't ever just take somebody's word for something. Always trust your own gut in everything you're doing, especially in your fertility journey. Don't stop until you feel ready to stop, and don't be afraid to take the risk and pivot and advocate for yourself and leave one provider to go to another. Don't stop seeking out resources. I feel like sometimes people give up too early because they're frustrated and nobody is helping them and giving them the right information. And it's not always about necessarily spending more money or doing more cycles. It's just take a step back, reevaluating, being like, what other resources or things can I learn and tap into, because I'm not ready to stop yet. You have to trust your gut in everything. You have to trust your spidey sense.
I love it. No, it's very, very true. Spoken like someone who gets it. And that's what I love to hear about this. This sounds like, you all get it and your team gets it. And I think that is what most of us are looking for when we find ourselves in this space, like people who get it, whether it is a doctor or a provider or, a concierge, head of concierge, or a nurse, whoever it is. We just want someone who gets it and who is passionate about it and who is going to just give us a hug virtually or in person and tell us, you know what, we're going to do the very best for you, and feel like, you know what, I think they are. Like, I believe them. And that's what it sounds like you all are doing at myStoria. So if someone wants to reach out to you, how can they find you on social media? And then if someone wants to find myStoria, how can they do that as well?
Yeah, so you can check me out on Instagram, Carly_fertility advocate. I'm always there. myStoria, you can check out our website, and there's all the amazing links on there. So you can click to sign up and kind of read a little bit more about what it is and see if it's your vibe. That's what we're here for. We're here to laugh with you, cry with you, and I'm here to fight for you when you feel like you don't have any more strength to fight. I'm your warrior out there with the sword.
I love it. I just wish I would have known you years ago. I'm going to say, but I'm glad that somebody else gets to find you, hopefully on day one of their journey, and you can take them all the way to the top. So Carly, thank you so much for being a part of our community. I hope that everyone who, is able to get something from this information is able to take it, share it, run with it, and get the very best help possible. So thank you so much for jumping into our podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was amazing, and I hope I get to talk to you again soon.
Well, that wraps us up for this episode of Fertility Ain't For The podcast. Again, if you have not tapped in with Carly yet, if you have not followed myStoria, make sure you do so. It is a place for us, by us, as we said. It is built from people with an experience or a personal connection to the fertility community. And so they get you. They are there for you. So tap in with Carly, head over to myStoria.com, all their socials, and see if they can be a resource to you. She has helped people from the beginning of their journey, or people who have been on it for multiple years. And she told me off camera, she has never not been able to help someone find the answers that they need. So she's our people. In the meantime, go back and listen to all of our past episodes and past seasons. If you have not already done so, follow us on Fertility Ain't Fair on IG and check out our website, fertilityaintfair.com. And yeah, we'll be getting into more things. The season is just getting started. So if you have any guest recommendations or topics that you want to have covered, make sure you reach out to me and let me know. Slide in my DMs for a change. I'm always sliding in y'all to get more people to reach out and connect our community and our village. So in the meantime, as I always say, I'm your forever friend in fertility. Stay hopeful.